Before my first year of teaching, a veteran teacher told me, whatever you do, stay out of the teacher's lounge. She said it would be full of negative teachers, gossiping about the kids, gossiping about each other, and probably gossiping about me as soon as I left the room. This turned out to be easy advice to follow because my first year I was so busy that I spent every lunch period either trying to grade papers, giving lunch detentions, or just hyperventilating in my classroom in the dark. At the end of the year, though, I kind of regretted never going into the teacher's lounge because I hadn't really met many of my coworkers. So my second year, I did start eating lunch in the teacher's lounge sometimes, and that veteran teacher's advice wasn't far off. But it still made sense to go in the lounge sometimes because I needed adult companionship, and there are adults in the teacher's lounge. But also, I don't think that the advice about staying out of the teacher's lounge is meant to be taken literally. When people give you that advice, they're actually using the teacher's lounge as a shorthand for something else. And that something is toxic negativity. There are a few types of conversations that fall under this category. Gossip is one of them, especially if it's really vicious, ungenerous gossip that makes you afraid to open up at work. But the main type of conversation that falls into the toxic negativity category is a kind of endless, hopeless complaining, where you keep talking about something that drags you down and you're not really getting to a point of solving it in any way. And on top of that, nobody feels better at the end of that conversation. They feel worse. If you feel better after complaining, according to psychologist Nedra Tawwab, that is called venting. Unfortunately, I do not remember which of these books this advice came from, but I recommend both of the books you see on the screen right now. Her take on complaining, which I found really helpful, is that there are really three types of negative conversations. There's problem solving, venting, and ruminating. Problem solving is just what it sounds like. You're asking for someone's help figuring out a solution to this problem. Venting is not problem solving. You just want to get something off your chest. And in fact, you really may not want someone to help you problem solve. You just want them to listen to you. Both of these are okay. Both of these are fine. It is good to be clear to both yourself and the other person which one you're doing, because we've probably all had the experience where we just wanted to vent and someone jumps in with a solution and that's not what we were looking for. But both venting and problem solving are fine as long as you're clear on which one you're doing. The third type of negative conversation is called ruminating. I think it actually comes from the same root word as chew, and it might have something to do with the way cows kind of throw back up the grass that they eat and chew it again. Ruminating is where you just keep thinking about something negative, and every time you think about it, you just kind of feel worse and worse. It colors your whole mood. You just put yourself in this state of mind where you're like, this thing that's bothering me is a metaphor for life. Or if you're doing it with another person, it's called co-ruminating. When you co-ruminate, it's you and another person. You start out bonding by maybe what feels like venting, getting things off your chest. But at some point, it's like you're trying to outdo each other. How bad can this be? In the case of teaching, it would be like, how hopeless is this job? How terrible is this principal? How much of a mess is this whole education system? What do they expect us to do? These kids, blah, 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 the parents, blah, 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 our coworkers. By the time you're done with this conversation, not only has nothing gotten solved, which again can be okay, but you don't feel like you've gotten something off your chest, because you don't feel lighter, you feel heavier. And on top of that, whatever the other person is ruminating about with you has now added to your load. And by the way, I have definitely in my life and in my teaching career had the experience of complaining until people find an excuse to leave the room. Over time, I think I trained myself to try to stick with either the problem solving or venting conversation. And when I'm venting, I try to be pretty careful who I vent to, but also I try to just say, I'm here to vent. Can you just listen to me for 5 minutes? And then at least the person knows they don't have to fix it, but also they don't need to add to the conversation by saying, not only do you think it's a little bit hopeless, it's actually a lot hopeless, and here's why. I would have benefited from this if someone had sat me down early in my teaching career and explained this difference to me. Basically, you can always make a case for despair. And you can always seek out information, especially in this curated information environment. You could probably find a podcast or a YouTube video or a radio station that will absolutely tell you you are right to despair about everything. But then, if you're a teacher, you're walking into your classroom in the morning with like a 50-pound weight on you. And that's too much weight to be carrying when there are real problems that you face every day. And your students kind of need you to hold as much bandwidth in your emotional rubber band as you can, because kids can be annoying, kids can be frustrating, kids can push on that rubber band that only has so much give to it. And so if you can avoid walking in to school in the morning with that rubber band pulled as far as it can possibly go, you have more to give to your students. And even if you can make a case for despair day to day, why do it? Why live like that?
A good screening process to keep yourself from going down unhelpful mental rabbit holes is to ask yourself if something is both true and useful. You don't want something that's useful but not true. That kind of falls into the category of toxic positivity, which I talk about in another video on this playlist. But something can also be completely true and not useful. There's something called availability bias, which is when you've thought about something recently, it pops into your head much more easily than if you haven't thought about it in a while. And so if you are constantly reinforcing something that, yes, may be true, but also makes you incredibly anxious or short-tempered with students, that can be something that is true but not useful, and you want to be careful of spending too much time in that headspace. And I think that's where the soul of that stay out of the teacher's lounge advice comes from. Because the thing about the teacher's lounge is that if there is a lot of toxic negativity going on in there, you can end up kind of trapped listening to that for your entire lunch break. And then you go back to the class and the kids are a little bit annoying, proving this stuff right.
All that being said, you don't need to stay out of the teacher's lounge and you don't need to stay positive at all times. In fact, sometimes you need to break that stay positive code in order to stay sane. And sane is better. In fact, my courses for teachers are collectively called the Maintain and Stay Sane program for teachers.
And one of them is specifically focused on managing that emotional rubber band so that you can get closer to being the teacher you came to be and enjoy teaching more.
This video is part of a series that I'm working on right now about toxic positivity, toxic negativity, and teacher advice. And if you are interested in that, you will find the link to that playlist underneath this video. Thank you for watching and have a great day.